Hey guys, back again with another video, a Resident Evil 3 Nemesis review. Yeah, I know I said in my Resident Evil 2 review that I wasn't going to do a review on the next Resident Evil game I was going to play, but I don't know, I couldn't resist. I'm going to still do the series review, but you know what, I'm kind of doing a marathon of these games, so why not talk about all of them? Now, this review is not going to be as in-depth as the Resident Evil 2 review, because that was a special case where I was kind of getting into survival horror more. That game kind of opened my eyes to the genre and these old school Resident Evil games. I just decided to kind of do a review on this one. After this, I'm gonna have to play Code Veronica, and then I'm gonna play Resident Evil 0, and then I'm gonna play Resident Evil 4 again. 5 and 6 I'm probably not gonna touch again. I've not really have much of an interest in playing those games again, especially 6. One of my friends is kind of watching me play through these games. He's like a hardcore Resident Evil fan, so that's another reason why I decided to actually do a marathon of this series. And then just the fact that I've never played a lot of these old school ones, Nemesis included. And this game, I had heard from a lot of people that this was an underrated entry in the series. Especially nowadays. I remember when it came out, I think a lot of people were kind of hard on it because it wasn't like a massive departure from the second game. And by this point, I think people were getting kind of tired of tank controls. And just, I don't know, people feel like the Resident Evil series by this point needed to have like a massive change. Obviously, that wasn't until Resident Evil 4 really where we finally got that. I generally, the reception from what I've seen of this game has gotten kind of more positive over the years since release, but it's not held in the same high regard as the first game or the second game. I generally find people seem to like it more than Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0, which from what I've seen have very mixed receptions. Like, some people love those games, some people despise them, so it's going to be interesting to see what I think of those ones. Nemesis, did I enjoy it? Yeah, I did. I quite liked it. I don't like it as much as Resident Evil 1. I especially don't like it as much as Resident Evil 2. It's got some problems, and it's kind of interesting to see the direction this game has taken. And right off the bat, when you play through this game, you really notice that this series got more action-oriented as you went along. And we'll get to it in the gameplay, the reasons why, but let's start the review off with kind of the story. There's not really much to say here. It takes place during the events of Resident Evil 2. You're Jill Valentine from the first game, and the main plot here is just to escape Raccoon City. It doesn't get a whole lot more complicated than that. There's some side characters you'll meet along the way, and then you have the titular Nemesis, who's like this kind of bioweapon designed specifically to kill or target and kill STARS members, you're contending with Nemesis kind of along the way. You'll meet this task force sent by Umbrella to kind of visit Raccoon City, and you'll meet this Carlos character who's kind of, you take control of him at one point during the game, and there's some kind of a friendship kind of at the core between those two in the game. But yeah, there's I don't know, this series is still hadn't got up its own ass with lore and shit like that. And I really like a lot of the environmental storytelling in this game, and it's just really cool just exploring Raccoon City and seeing the remnants of it. One particular part I really liked was like the hospital section. Just reading all the notes there about how the infection kind of spread throughout the hospital. All the environmental storytelling I love in this game, but the actual main story is not too interesting. And Jill, I like Jill as a character, but the rest of the characters you'll meet are kind of like Carlos is kind of, I don't know, he's kind of like a nothing character. He's kind of funny in some ways. And then you have like this other part of the task force, what was his name, Nikolai, I think, who's just like comically over the top, like evil. It's I don't know, I don't think the storytelling is as strong in this game as it is in the second game. But it's nothing horrible like in some of the later games in the series. As much as I like Resident Evil 4, I think the story in that game is far worse than what's on offer here. Anyways, that's about it for the story. There's again not much to say. It's actually probably a little more simplistic than previous games in the story, but not necessarily a bad thing. I will say, with the game's general focus more on action, there's a lot of cutscenes with like crazy explosions and shit like that. There's a lot of like action movie type cutscenes in this one, kind of similar to the second game, but a lot, actually more of them this time around, which was kind of interesting to see. But yeah, let's move on to the gameplay. And I guess actually before I should say that, one of the differences here is that there's not two campaigns. There's only one campaign in this game, where you just play as Jill, and there's like the one brief section where you'll play as Carlos for a bit in that campaign. You unlock a mercenaries mode at the end of it, which is kind of interesting to see that it's kind of started in this game. But it plays differently than Resident Evil 4, where you have to like get from point A to point B, and killing zombies will increase your time limit. And then you'll get like graded at the end. You'll get money to unlock like infinite ammo weapons for the main campaign, which is pretty cool. I didn't mess with it too much, but it's a cool little bonus mode that they added, which is nice. Now it's a short game, but the single campaign is longer than one of the single campaigns in Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 took me like almost a little under 5 hours. This one took me a little under 8 hours. So it's for an old school Resident Evil game, it's a decent size. It's probably comparable to the first game, I would say, or at least the remake of the first game, which was longer than the original Resident Evil. But anyways, gameplay, yeah, it's far more action oriented. There's a lot more zombies and enemies that we put on screen in this game, and they throw a ton of enemies at you compared to Resident Evil 2. You get a lot more ammo than that game, but you'll need a lot more ammo in this game. I was actually running out quite often and had to run by a lot of enemies just because they were throwing so much at you. And unlike the previous games, this game tends to respawn enemies in old areas when you do a lot of the backtracking, which is a little tedious. I wasn't a huge fan of that, especially later in the game. It gets really obnoxious, especially in the factory environment where there's one room that every time you backtrack through it, they're like these 4 enemies that constantly respawn there. Really tough enemies too that like will take a lot of ammo and that are really hard to run past. So that was kind of annoying. And just the backtracking in general in this game, there's a lot more of it, and that kind of ties in with the level design, which is probably going to be the first talking point here. The level design in this game is not as good as Resident Evil 1 or 2. It's cool exploring the city, you get to see more of the city, but it's basically small, like, self-contained environments with very little connecting paths. A lot of the game is basically just, like, backtracking through the same areas, using items to solve puzzles. And, yeah, I don't know, it was a little more... I didn't mind it in the previous games, because there wasn't respawning enemies, and just the ways the environments connected were really cool. There's a lot of shortcuts and things like that. This game doesn't have any of that, so it can be pretty frustrating. And then you have the puzzles. I mentioned in my Resident Evil 2 review that the puzzles were very simplified compared to the first game. It was basically just finding certain keys to open certain doors. They didn't get much more complex than that. This game, they bring back the adventure game style puzzles, and I pretty much hated all of them. There's one particular like water puzzle at the very end of the game that was so frustrating. It was so tough to figure out what you had to do. It was one of the puzzles where you look at it, you're just like, what the fuck is this? What is the game telling me here? I can't I don't understand this. And even when you do finally figure out what you're really supposed to do, it's not intuitive, and it's just tedious and frustrating. There was only one puzzle I liked in this game, the music box puzzle. I thought was actually really cool and clever, and it wasn't too annoying, but the rest of them are just like, ugh. There's one part in the game, too, that I got stuck at for a long time, because it had to do with a certain item that you had that could be used for a certain part of the game that just, it didn't occur to me that you could use the item in a certain way that they wanted. So yeah, not a fan of them bringing back all the obtuse puzzles from the first game. But yeah, it's like the environments are still fun to explore. The game still has that great survival horror feel where there's a lot of tense moments where you're running low on ammo. You're not sure if you're going to get to a save point before dying. They give you a lot more ink ribbons in this game. I did notice that compared to the second game, I gotta say. Some of the, I guess, talking about like kind of the additions in this game compared to previous games, because there's some good ones. There's a quick turn now, which is great. Although surprisingly, I didn't use it all that much. I think it's more useful with like the boss fights, but still, it's a good addition to have. Tank controls obviously are still a part of the game. You have a dodge move, which actually saved my ass quite a few times, but it's still finicky when you actually want to pull it off, where there's a couple different ways to activate it. There's a couple different button combinations where before an enemy attacks you or does like kind of a melee swipe, you can press a button to do a quick dodge. And it's really cool when you pull it off in the heat of the moment, but when you're actually trying to do it, I find it just does not work sometimes. The timing of it, I don't know, it feels off to me. It just doesn't feel natural. So it's a cool addition that's not implemented as well as I would have liked, but I can't deny the amount of times that I've accidentally pulled it off, and actually saved my ass. So I don't know. For the most part, I think it's a good addition to the game. The way ammo works is a little different. You'll find your traditional ammo for your weapons, but you'll find like gunpowder that you can kind of mix together with like this reloading tool to make like a ton of ammo. So if you like combine 3 gunpowder type A's, you get a AAA, which will give you a ton of handgun ammo compared to like just using a standard A. So there's some strategy there with which ones you want to combine, and there's also some strategy with the inventory system, which you might find like a gunpowder B, but you might be running low on shotgun ammo, and a decision you might have to make is, oh, do I use this now to give me a little bit of ammo so I can take care of some really strong enemies that might be up ahead, or do I save this, put it in my item box, and then later I'll have the chance to get a shit ton of shotgun ammo. So I kind of like the system in that way, where it adds that kind of a little bit more strategy to like the combat, if you will. I mean, other than that, there's some randomized elements to the game that I thought were actually pretty cool. And it's not something I really realized until my friend told me, and then there was one moment in particular where there's like this elevator, and I went through this elevator, I opened the door, and like a million zombies started pouring in, and I died. I was not really expecting it, and I don't know, I was being stupid and didn't use my shotgun. I was using my handgun, which the handgun sucks in this game, but so I died, right? I reloaded my save, and the next time they weren't there. The zombies didn't come in the elevator, and then my friend was going on about how there's little randomized elements like that. So each playthrough will be a little different in that way, and I thought that was actually really cool. That's like this cool part of the game that they don't really tell you. I guess we should probably talk about Nemesis, the big thing with this game, the big change. But really, you saw this in Resident Evil 2 with Mr. X. It's just doubling down on that idea, where Nemesis will follow you through these environments, and here he is here in the gameplay here. And areas that you thought were previously safe might not be anymore because he'll just chase you through them. It makes backtracking a lot more tense than previous games, and he's extremely fast. Every time he was chasing me, I was just like, oh shit. I don't know, I actually really like Nemesis. It's towards the end, it gets a little obnoxious, I gotta say, just with the sheer amount of backtracking and just the fact that they'll throw really tough enemies at you as well. Also, there's like these little sections of the game where you'll have to make a choice. Like there's like these split-second choice parts, basically, where the screen will freeze and you'll get like 2 options, and that will kind of change how the game plays out in certain ways as well. Which is pretty cool, and in some instances you can temporarily kill Nemesis and get like a special item, and you can also fight Nemesis whenever you encounter him. I think there's multiple times where you'll find him, and you'll get some good items if you do actually kill him. Honestly, though, for the most part, I didn't think it was worth the risk. It's just way too easy to get hit by him in these small environments and with the tank controls that I never felt it was worth it. But there are a few instances where you can kill him with those little split-second choices, and then there is a couple fights where you do actually have to take him down, which those are probably the worst part of the game. Like with previous Resident Evil games, the boss fights, like even with the quick turn and the dodging, the tank controls just do not work well with these boss battles, where they're so fast and their attacks can hit you so easily. The last Nemesis fight in particular was a pain in the ass. Like, his health is absolutely absurd, and it's just like I was almost running out of ammo. I'd use like multiple healing items. and there's these valves that you're supposed to shoot to like spill acid on the floor, but it's so hard to target them. And that's another thing that actually kind of bugged me about the game. There's a lot of like parts of the environment you can shoot now, like explosive barrels, and there's kind of a way to auto-target certain objects, but it's very finicky. A lot of the times it just didn't work, and I would target things I didn't want to target when I was meaning to like shoot an explosive barrel. And yeah, that last Nemesis fight is where the targeting system really falls apart. I hated the last Nemesis fight in this game. It was fucking atrocious. But the last phase of it was actually pretty cool, where you use well, I don't really want to spoil it, but you use a special weapon to take him down, and that actually I did like. It was a little different. You didn't have to. It wasn't like a lot of these boss fights in these old Resident Evil games where you just unload your most powerful ammo and just stand there using healing items whenever you're low on health. But yeah, like with previous Resident Evil games, I do not care for the bosses. But yeah, the gameplay is definitely a lot more action oriented. It's still got the great exploration for the most part, but yeah, there's just so many more enemies here, and you're just in combat a lot more. Or a lot more often than you were in previous games, I gotta say. I mean, I guess that about covers it for gameplay. There's not too much else to say, really. It's enjoyable. There's just certain things about it that just I'm not crazy about, and just the level design, yeah, it took a big hit, but for the most part, I do really like what Nemesis adds to the game. But I will say the one last thing I want to bring up is the factory section towards the end. I think the game really starts to fall apart at that point, where they'll just throw these really obnoxious enemies at you constantly. They throw the most annoying puzzles in the game at you, and then they have you backtracking over and over through these, from this one area to the other area, back and forth, and then they top it off with the annoying Nemesis fight. And it was just I at that point in the game I was like, oh. This is really kind of starting to lose me here, and it's kind of a shame. If it wasn't for that whole factory section, I would probably be a lot more positive on this game than I am. But for the most part, I did enjoy it. I think if you haven't played it, it's well worth playing. Just play the first two games first. And old school Resident Evil fans that for some reason haven't played this, I would definitely recommend it. But other than that, yeah, I guess we'll talk about the visuals and the music here. Visuals, it's not like a huge radical departure from Resident Evil 2. It looks very similar. I think the environments look a little better. I think the character models definitely look better, and it's noticeable, yeah, especially with like the Jill's character model, especially if you compare her to like the first game. Yeah, it's still like I love these pre-rendered backgrounds. They add this great atmosphere to the game. Which I guess I will talk about atmosphere. This game isn't quite as creepy as Resident Evil 1 and 2. I don't know, it just doesn't have the same vibe to me for some reason. Maybe a part of that is the music, which I don't think the music in this is anywhere near as good as the previous two games. There's some good tracks here. The safe room music is reliably great as always, but I don't know, it just didn't catch my attention like the first two games. There's also not as many jump scares in this one from what I noticed compared to the second game. A lot of that is basically just Nemesis and the way he interacts with the environments, which is pretty cool. But yeah, not as much jump scares in this one. But yeah, audio, voice acting is as good as it is in Resident Evil 2, maybe a little bit better, although Carlos's voice actor is a little spotty in places, and the dialogue is still definitely hokey as well. But yeah, the soundtrack, I gotta say, was a little bit disappointing compared to the previous two games. But yeah, I mean, that's about it. Nemesis, yeah, a very enjoyable game. I don't know. I don't think it's ever a game I would ever come back to. But definitely well worth playing for fans of the series or people that just want like an old school survival horror experience. The last thing I guess I'll mention, the ports. I didn't know there was a Dreamcast port of this game. That's kind of interesting. From what I hear, it's actually that and the GameCube versions are the best way to play this game. Of course, I went with the PS1 version on the PS3, but yeah, anyways, that's it, guys. The next game we'll tackle is Code Veronica. Very interested to see what I'm going to think of that one. I've heard that the game is very stingy with ammo, and it's one of the hardest games in the series. Which I guess difficulty of Resident Evil 3. This game's definitely harder than the second one. Like, actually quite a bit harder. I died a lot more in this one. And like I mentioned before, it's just because of the sheer amount of enemies they throw at you in this one. And then the fact that it's pretty tough to dodge a lot of them in these tight corridor type environments. But yeah, Code Veronica is going to be interesting. I'm going to be playing the PS4 or PS2 Classics version of it. That's actually really the only way I have to access that game. And then it's on to Resident Evil 0. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.